Hey there, everybody. It's Hunter Avallone here. First off, I want to apologize for my stuffy sounding nose. I'm just getting over a cold. And right off the bat, you're probably noticing this is a little bit of a different kind of video. For one thing, I'm sitting down. I have not opened up my video with an overly tacky skit. I'm not flashing facts on the screen, and I shockingly have not called anybody a faggot yet. So yes, this is a very, very unique and different kind of video, right? That's because I really did want to talk a little bit more about some personal stuff, some personal struggles I'm kind of dealing with. And for all the people wondering, no, this is not a troll video. This is actually a pretty serious video. And no, I have not converted to liberalism or Islam, okay? I've not completely lost my mind. But I do want to talk about religion today. And more specifically, my own personal experiences with religion. So, a lot of people know this, a lot of people don't. But yes, I was raised Christian, and there's a lot of misrepresentation that goes on about me, claims that I'm a die-hard creationist Christian, which seems sort of silly to me, but I can kind of understand where they get this from, because a couple years back, I used to make videos that made it a lot more obvious what my religious beliefs were. Those videos have, however, come to a complete halt. So just to give you a basic rundown, I went to kindergarten at a Christian private school until after kindergarten my parents decided to homeschool me. And I want to be very clear that I'm not blaming my parents for anything that I'm about to say in this video. My parents have been great and extremely supportive, and they still are extremely supportive of me. When I was homeschooled, I was raised Christian. I would go to church on Sundays, I went to youth group, went to Sunday school. It's all the typical kind of stuff. And I still remember the day I became a Christian. I was very young, maybe 6 or 7, and I was under the kitchen table, and I was having my prayer time, and I prayed that God would help me be born again. But yeah, that's kind of what I remember as the time that I became a Christian. Fast forward a couple years later, I'm still pretty young, and I was a pretty adamant Christian. There was a time that I actually wanted to listen to sermons before I went to bed. This was just something that I really wanted to do to help me become a stronger Christian. And it was right around the time, I think it was right after I turned 13, that I saw a specific YouTube video. And you have to remember, I was 13, I had not watched a lot of scary things, and this video was called A Letter from Hell. It's actually still on YouTube. I actually recently watched it. And it's this really scary video about a dude who dies, and he goes to hell, and then he writes a letter to his still living friend talking about the dark angels that are coming to throw him into the pit of fire and all this kind of scary stuff. And at the time, I didn't know it, but I know this now, and this is a little bit personal, but I don't mind sharing this. I suffer from an anxiety disorder called OCD, so I deal with a lot of intrusive thoughts, a lot of thoughts in my head that I don't want there, and I think this was one of my first encounters with OCD. This video set me into this anxiety stage, and for weeks and almost months, this was kind of on and off, and I was dealing with this pretty severe anxiety. It was more like I dealt with very severe anxiety for the first, maybe week or two. Then it would kind of go away after I would talk to people about it. Then it would kind of come back and sort of, yeah, I just think it may have been my first experience, my first encounter with this OCD. I was still a pretty adamant Christian at the time. I would read my Bible all the time. There was a time that I actually brought my Bible with me in the car so I could read it. And then another encounter, I believe, with OCD anyway, were doubts about Christianity. And I think this was the first time that I experienced doubts. But since I had this OCD thing that I was kind of dealing with that I didn't know at the time it was OCD, but I think it's fair to say it probably was, it really freaked me out. I remember having all these thoughts like, what if God isn't real? What if Christianity is wrong? What if the pastor is wrong? And I remember this was causing me such intense anxiety, these thoughts racing through my mind. I was actually at a church event making these cookie bowls for a fundraiser. And as I'm making these cookie bowls, these thoughts are racing through my head. And I just remember having throbbing anxiety and doing everything I can to just fight the tears back from just breaking down. I got this book that I read. It was actually called Answers to Tough Questions Skeptics Ask About the Christian Faith or something like that. And this helped to comfort me quite a lot. So I kind of had my doubts. I would read the book. I was like, okay, cool. Moving on, years later, I had more doubts, but it wasn't like anxiety kind of doubts. It was kind of like this gnawing feeling, like what if you're not really a Christian? Am I really a Christian? And I would pray, and for some reason, I don't know how else to put this, and I know I criticize feelings so much, but for this example specifically, I would pray, I would read my Bible, I would pray to become a Christian, whatever, it wouldn't matter. I just couldn't feel it. It felt like I was saying empty words. Like, I didn't feel it in my heart. Like, I didn't feel like I believed it. And I remember that I was sitting in church one time. I was still younger then. And the pastor said, if you don't know you're a Christian, then you probably aren't a Christian. And I remember that specific time is just kind of freaking me out. But yeah, this kind of just went on for years. For years and years, I would just wonder, am I really a Christian? I would say, yeah, I'm a Christian, but I would just not feel it. It felt like I was saying empty words. And then it was only about maybe last year, maybe the end of 2015, somewhere around that I really started to, I guess, look critically at Christianity. I got to this point, I'm not really sure when I reached this point, where I stopped worrying so much whether I really am a Christian, or like they would say things at church, like raise your hand if you want to become a Christian. And I kind of wanted to raise my hand, but I was sort of worried, like, what are people going to think about me? Like, I'm already supposed to be a Christian here. But I finally got to a point where I was able to just step back and look critically at Christianity and look critically and what I am claiming I believe. I remember being in church and I would hear them talking. They would say something about God. I don't remember exactly what it was. And I would go into, I hate to use this word, but I would go into skeptic mode. And I would be like, really? Really? And I was just becoming more and more critical, more and more skeptical of Christianity. And I'll be honest, what didn't help was my very bad experiences I've had with Christians. And listen, I know that Christians cannot, represent Christianity's beliefs all the time. I understand this. My experiences with Christians have not really been the greatest. And a good example of this is when I really got started on YouTube and I really started to enjoy doing some more of this edgy kind of humor, I would have Christians sending me messages. One Christian specifically actually sent me a message that said my videos were causing his friends to doubt their Christian faith. Or something like that. I don't know, something pathetic. And people would start to have problems with me. They would send me messages. They would talk about how they weren't happy with what I was making. And these were all Christians. And these Christians were people that went to the church I attended at the time. And these Christians were also people that literally would not even sneeze in my direction. And there was one guy that, like, I think we would say hi on and off like a couple years ago. He was offended by some Islam post I made. How dare I criticize Islam while they completely ignore all the violence done in the name of Islam. One of those just pathetic kind of scenarios. Christians still criticize me. And when they do it, you can just hear the condescending attitude behind their words. Because it gets really annoying whenever I make a post on Instagram or make a joke on YouTube that I think is funny, but it's a little bit edgy, I get a bunch of these, snobby, snot-nosed Christians coming at me saying, oh gosh, Hunter, that's not very Christian, Hunter. That you're being unchristian, Hunter. Just shut the hell up, okay? That you can just tell they're standing on their pedestal, looking down. They just think they're so much better than thou. So moving on, yeah, I would continue to look critically at Christianity. The more critical I became of Christianity, the more, I guess, flawed it started to seem. And I'm a very logic-based person. If something isn't logical, then I have a really hard time believing it. And I've kind of reached this point where I don't know how on earth, me as a logical person, I am supposed to believe that an all-knowing spirit who came out of nothing, created the earth, and then hears your prayers even when you close your eyes and pray them in your mind. So I'm supposed to believe that there is a giant, all-knowing spirit floating around the earth that can read my thoughts. I mean, does this not sound crazy? And this would happen to me when I was in church. Before I came to this point, they would say things, and I would just think, this just sounds like a fairy tale. And the more I looked into it, the more I saw the starking amounts of evidence against creationism, Christianity, stuff like that. For example, there's layers of fossils. And again, this is just kind of off the top of my head. If I get a fact wrong, I'm sorry. Layers of fossils, but creationists claim there's a worldwide flood. If there was a flood, wouldn't it make more sense that the fossils would be mixed up and scattered all over the place? But no, instead we find layers upon layers. Another thing is, creationists make a complete ludicrous claim that the Earth is 6,000 years old. I don't believe that for a second. Whether I'm a Christian or not, I do not believe that. There are stars in our galaxy, and the amount of time it would take for the light beam to go from the star and hit our Earth is longer than 6,000 years. How on earth can the world, can the universe be 6,000 years old when there is proven evidence, proven fact that there are things older than 6,000 years old? And besides being just generally ignorant to specific facts, I started to see other flaws in Christianity. And one of my biggest problems with Christianity being the way it seems to be a bit of a circle jerk. Christians say, well, God is real. Okay, we'll prove it. Well, it says so in the Bible. And the way I think is, how is that any different than a feminist saying, hey, Hunter, guess what? The wage gap is real. And me saying, okay, well, why don't you go ahead and prove that? She goes, yeah, go to feminism.com. It's just this circular logic. It just goes back into itself. And a lot of Christians will say, you know, Hunter, you don't think that God is real because you're not spending time with God. You're just not spending enough time with him. Well, I want to show you something. This is my little friend, Weezy. Weezy was given to me as a present when I was like 4 years old from my grandparents. Weezy is a little stuffed animal that I used to talk to when I was younger. And I would have a conversation with this stuffed animal for 20, 30 minutes, or until I got tired enough to just set him down and go to sleep. But the thing is, the more time I spent talking to this fake stuffed animal, and the more I made this stuffed animal talk back to me, the more real Weezy started to feel. And by the time I actually put Weezy down so that I could fall asleep, I felt like this was a real stuffed animal. The more time I spent talking to Weezy, the more real it became. The more time you spend, yes, of course, if every single day you get down on your knees and go, dear Jesus, please hear my prayers. Every moment you're spending praying and talking to God, then of course God is going to start to feel more real. But just if he starts to feel more real, doesn't mean he is real. Because just like Weezy felt really real, Weezy is not real. All right? He's a dumb little stuffed animal. And you know, I don't know if Bigfoot is real or not, but why do you think people who dedicate their entire lives to searching for Bigfoot, even though they've never found Bigfoot, are dead set on the fact that Bigfoot must exist? Because the more time you dedicate to anything, the more real it becomes. But just if it becomes real to you, doesn't mean that it actually exists. Another thing about God, and this is a very typical thing said by a lot of the, I don't know, I hate saying skeptics, but I don't know what else to say. God is what's called, I believe it's an unfalsifiable hypothesis. That's the idea that just if you can't prove something doesn't exist, it must exist. So if I say, you know, I can shoot rainbows out of my finger, but only when you're not looking. You have your eyes closed. I can shoot rainbows out of this finger. Can you prove me wrong? No. Does that mean I can shoot rainbows out of my finger? Also no. Another thing I hear from Christians, anytime someone dies, you know, God has a plan. I know it's so hard to believe this, but trust me, God has a plan for you. This is part of God's plan. There was one thing that struck me thinking of this logic, and that is 9/11, the Twin Towers, and that very famous footage of the man jumping from the towers, plummeting to his death. And it was videos like that, and I saw that video and I thought, really? So God has a plan. Is that part of God's plan for that guy to jump off that building? I'm asking. I'm asking like myself. You know, is that part of God's plan to just go for that man to jump off the building, that innocent guy who did nothing wrong, who has a family, to jump off the building? Are you really going to try to tell me that's part of God's plan? And, you know, I think another common thing Christians would say is, well, God's going to use this to bring other people to him. God's going to use this horrible thing that happened to bring other people to him. Well, I'm sorry, but that seems like a really skewed God who's going to allow innocent people to die so that other people could come to salvation. And if he's God, why doesn't he just allow them to come to salvation without letting an innocent life die? So I'm kind of in this weird place in my life where I'm sort of torn, because it's like one half of me doesn't want to let go of Christianity because it's all I've ever known. You know I bashed on Christians, but at the same time, some of my friends are Christian, and some of my good friends that I've gotten to know, I have gotten to know them through church. And I just find Christian logic to be so skewed. And so, like, I don't know. This whole video, I guess, was just made for me to say I don't know. I don't know how I can continue to believe something that seems to have zero factual backing. But at the same time, I don't know how I can just, abandon Christianity and go over to atheism, because I don't know how I can accept that this amazing earth and everything on it that is so unique and so intricate could have happened by random chance, or could have happened by an explosion, or could have just evolved out of nothing. So yeah, guys, that was just kind of a little heart-to-heart about religion. I don't want you to think of me as an atheist either, because I'm certainly not an atheist. Not yet, anyway. But yeah, guys, thanks so much for watching. I hope that you will give this video a like, share it around, comment below. I'd love to know your thoughts on this. Again, I know this was scattered, but still. Thanks everyone for listening. Thanks everyone for watching. I'll see you again soon.